Tariffs are about making America rich again and making America great again, and it's happening, and it will happen rather quickly.
Economic uncertainty surrounding the North American auto industry. The big three are navigating a new era as they deal with the impact of President Trump's tariff.
They're coming home. They're all coming home. And we want them to come home. They have to come home. We're going to treat them really well.
Stellantis, the parent company of Jeep, Dodge, and Chrysler, has just shut down two of its major North American plants. Production in both Windsor, Canada, and Toluca, Mexico, has been paused. Here in the U.S., over 900 workers have been placed on temporary layoff. But why? The answer lies in a bold and controversial move from former President Donald Trump. Trump's 2025 tariffs, specifically targeting auto imports and global steel, are causing serious ripple effects across the American auto industry. Supporters say the tariffs are a necessary step to bring manufacturing back home. Critics warn they could trigger a full-blown industrial crisis. And the shutdown at Stellantis? It may just be the first domino to fall. In today's video, we break down what's happening, why it matters, and what it could mean for car prices, jobs, and America's place in the global economy. Let's dive in. Segment 1. What happened at Stellantis? Let's start with the facts. On April 7th, Stellantis, one of the world's largest car manufacturers, halted production at two major plants. The first is in Windsor, Ontario, just across the border from Detroit. The second is in Toluca, Mexico, a key facility for electric vehicle assembly. The company described the decision as a temporary production pause while they reassess market conditions. But behind that corporate phrasing is a much bigger problem. In total, 900 U.S.-based workers have been placed on temporary layoff. These aren't overseas jobs. These are American factory jobs in places like Michigan and Ohio. And right now, there's no clear date for when production will restart. Initially, Stellantis said operations might resume by late April, but that deadline has since passed with no confirmation. Affected models include the Jeep Compass, Dodge Charger, and several upcoming electric vehicles. These aren't niche products. They're core to Stellantis's U.S. strategy. And this disruption, it's not just about numbers on a balance sheet. It's affecting real people. One assembly line worker in Windsor told The Independent, "We don't know when we'll be called back. Rents still due. Groceries don't wait. But the plant, it's quiet." It's a stark reminder that economic policy doesn't live on paper. It plays out in real lives. And it raises a critical question. Why would a company that's already building cars in North America hit pause right now? To answer that, we need to look at what changed in April 2025. And all roads lead back to one major policy shift: Trump's 2025 tariffs. Let's break those down. Segment 2, Trump's 2025 tariffs, the trigger. To understand what's happening at Stellantis and across the broader auto industry, we need to go back to early April 2025. That's when former President Donald Trump, now once again a major force in U.S. politics, announced a new set of sweeping tariffs under his revised America First 2.0 trade agenda. At the center of this move, Trump's 2025 tariffs. The new policy imposes a 25% tariff on all imported automobiles, including those built in Canada, Mexico, and even by U.S. brands like Ford or GM if they're assembled abroad. And critically, a 50% tariff on all imported steel and aluminum, materials essential to car manufacturing. But it doesn't stop there. To qualify for tariff exemptions, imported metals must now meet a new standard. They must be melted and poured in the United States. That means raw materials can't just be processed overseas and shipped in. They need to be produced domestically from start to finish. In theory, these tariffs are designed to protect American jobs, reduce reliance on foreign supply chains, and bring industrial power back to U.S. soil. Trump himself said at an Ohio rally in March, "We're not just talking about building things in America. We're going to make our steel, pour our aluminum, and build cars with American hands." It's a bold vision, but the reality is far more complicated. Because while the U.S. does produce steel and aluminum, it doesn't produce enough to meet the demand of modern car makers, especially not at competitive prices. That's where things start to break down. Companies like Stellantis rely on a highly globalized supply chain. They source steel from Brazil and Turkey, aluminum from Canada, and components from Germany, South Korea, and Mexico. When tariffs suddenly raise the cost of those materials by 25% to 50%, the math changes fast. Every vehicle becomes more expensive to build. And here's the kicker. Even U.S. based production isn't immune, because raw materials still need to be imported, even if the final assembly happens on American soil. So what's the result? Companies are forced to make hard decisions. For Stellantis, that meant halting operations, just to reassess whether continuing production under these new conditions makes financial sense. And if one of the world's biggest automakers is hitting pause, we have to ask, who's next? In the next segment, we'll break down how this policy is creating what some analysts are calling the auto industry crisis of 2025. Stay with us. Segment 3, Auto Industry Crisis 2025, what's at stake? So now we understand what triggered the pause at Stellantis. But Stellantis isn't alone. We're looking at what some experts are now calling the Auto Industry Crisis 2025. Why? Because these tariffs are doing more than shaking up supply chains. They're reshaping the cost structure of the entire industry. Let's talk numbers. According to projections from S&P Global and Wall Street Journal, the average cost to manufacture a new vehicle in the U.S. could rise by 5 to 12% in 2025. That's roughly $1,500 to $4,000 per car, an increase that will almost certainly be passed down to the buyer. And this hits hardest in the electric vehicle sector. EVs rely on a range of imported materials, lithium, nickel, cobalt, and components like batteries that are often assembled overseas. Stellantis insiders estimate that the cost of producing EVs could rise by as much as 18% per unit under the new tariff regime. That's a serious blow, especially when the industry is already pushing to lower EV prices and compete with Tesla and Chinese automakers. So what does this mean for consumers? It means more people will delay buying new cars. They'll stick with older models or switch to the used car market, driving up prices there too. Dealers across the country are already feeling the pressure. One Jeep dealer in Grand Rapids, Michigan told Fast Company, last month, the Compass was going for $28,000. Now it's closer to $30,000. Customers are walking out. They blame us, but we're just following the price sheets from the manufacturer. It's not just big automakers or dealers feeling the crunch. Thousands of smaller suppliers, Tier 2 and Tier 3 parts manufacturers, are struggling to absorb the rising costs of raw materials and logistics. These are the kinds of companies that can't afford to operate on razor-thin margins. If they fold, the entire production ecosystem starts to fall apart. So yes, this is about tariffs, but it's also about timing. After years of pandemic disruptions, chip shortages, and inflation, the auto industry was just beginning to stabilize. Now, it's heading straight into another storm, and this one could hit even harder. In the next segment, we'll look at how the effects of steel trade tariffs are spilling across borders and how America's global trade partners are starting to respond. Segment 4, Steel Trade Tariffs and Global Fallout. The impact of these tariffs isn't staying inside U.S. borders. Far from it. In fact, what started as a national economic strategy is now evolving into a global trade dispute. Let's start with the Steel Trade Tariffs USA, the 50% tax on imported steel and aluminum. This move directly affects major trading partners like Canada, Mexico, the European Union, South Korea, and Japan, and the response has been swift. Canada's Trade Ministry has already announced its intent to apply reciprocal tariffs on U.S. agriculture and consumer goods, totaling over $12 billion in potential trade retaliation. Mexico is threatening tariffs on U.S. auto parts and farm exports, and it doesn't end there. In Brussels, EU officials have labeled the policy economic aggression and are currently reviewing retaliatory measures that could impact everything from U.S. electronics to bourbon whiskey. Meanwhile, overseas automakers are rethinking their U.S. strategies. Volkswagen and BMW, both with major factories in Tennessee and South Carolina, have put expansion plans on hold. Instead, they're considering growing operations in Mexico or Eastern Europe, where the tariff exposure is lower. Japanese and Korean suppliers are also sounding the alarm. Shipping costs are rising, customs processes are slowing down, and materials are getting stuck in bureaucratic bottlenecks. The result? A ripple effect of delayed production, price hikes, and increased uncertainty across the global auto landscape. Even U.S.-based companies that depend on imported machinery or tooling are caught in the crossfire. And let's not forget the diplomatic strain. At a recent G20 meeting, multiple trade ministers raised concerns that the U.S. is undermining multilateral trade norms and moving dangerously close to triggering a full-blown trade war. Back home, the politics are intensifying too. At a town hall in Pennsylvania, Trump doubled down. "We don't need their steel. We'll build it ourselves. America first means American steel and American cars." But on the other side of the aisle, Democratic leaders argue that the tariffs are isolating U.S. manufacturers and alienating trade allies. So where does this leave us? With rising tensions abroad and rising costs at home. So here we are. 2 major plants shut down, 900 American workers out of a job, at least for now. Vehicle production disrupted, prices climbing, supply chains rattled, and it all ties back to one pivotal decision: Trump's 2025 tariffs, a bold attempt to rebuild American industry. But as we've seen, even U.S.-based manufacturers like Stellantis are struggling under the weight of these new rules. This isn't just a business story. It's a policy test, a trade war in the making, and a stress test for the future of American manufacturing. The question is no longer, does protectionism work? It's, can we afford the fallout? And more importantly, who pays the price? The factory worker in Michigan? The family trying to afford a new car? The small supplier who can't keep up with rising steel costs? This is Trump versus auto industry, and it's a fight that's far from over. With the 2025 election looming, voters will have to decide, do these tariffs protect American jobs, or do they risk gutting the very industries they aim to save? There's no easy answer. But what we do know is this: the decisions made in Washington are being felt on factory floors, car lots, and kitchen tables across the country. And the ripple effects, they've only just begun. Now we want to hear from you. Do you believe these tariffs are a smart strategy to protect American jobs? Or are they a risky move that could hurt both workers and consumers? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We value every perspective. If you found this video informative, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more deep dive coverage on the policies shaping our economy and our future. Thanks for watching. Stay informed and take care.